Hi, Lindley here, and welcome to this video on love strategies. So, what we're going to cover in this video is why we're going to learn about love strategies, what love strategies are and how to use them, as well as a challenge for you, of course, to notice what you've learned about love strategies and the challenge, of course, to practice what you've learned about love strategies. All right, so what exactly is it that we're talking about? Well, love strategies are really important because of the fact that when we're with a partner, with a spouse, or even in just a relationship with someone, when we give them the right love strategy, then they feel completely loved and cherished all the time. However, if we're giving them the wrong love strategy, no matter how honest our expression is, there isn't a chance for them to actually feel that love, even if we're trying really hard to show them or to tell them that we love them. If it's the wrong love strategy, they won't ever feel it from us. So we get into this situation where a lot of divorces or separations occur because the couples are giving each other the wrong love strategies. And I see this a lot with my clients. They'll come into the office on the very first day that we meet, and I can tell straight away that they're speaking in a different strategy to each other, showing each other different love strategies, different than the ones they want to feel. So what's often the case is the way that we feel a particular feeling of love is the way that we exude that love to someone else as well. And oftentimes our partner doesn't have the same strategy that we do. So us trying to love our partner in the way that we want to be loved isn't actually the way to do it. We have to find out what love strategy they have and then use the love strategy they have to show them that we love them. All right, so let's learn more about love strategies. So when we think about strategies as an overall term, strategies are how we do what we do. And most of the time, strategies are unconscious, like brushing our teeth or showering every day. We don't really mentally think about those strategies that we employ. Now, the only time that we normally do is when the strategy is going wrong, like in the case of love strategies. And most of my clients that come to me for coaching, it's because of the fact that somehow the strategy is going wrong. And that's what they come to me for. Strategies are one of my specialities, and I love working with them. So when I work with strategies, it's like sitting down with a client and listening to what's going on in their lives. And I'm listening first to what strategies they employ and what strategies that we can change. Strategies are very individual. They work for you. So it's like everybody has a different way of doing the dishes. The outcome might be the same, but the strategy we employ to do it, how we start, when we start, how we go through the process of doing dishes to the finished result, it's all different of how our mental strategy that we work doing that. And I'll give you an example. I have a friend of mine in New Zealand, and she has a very specific way of loading her dishwasher. And it's so much so that when I spent a month with them living there when I was in a training program, it was almost scary for me to load something like even just a bowl into the dishwasher, because I knew that if I didn't follow her strategy of how she does it, then she would literally unpack the entire dishwasher and repack it again before she'd start it. That's kind of how strategies are so important to some people. And strategies work for you. They don't necessarily, if somebody else employs the same strategy that you have, it doesn't necessarily work for them. So that's one of the techniques in NLP is we model strategies and then we might change that strategy slightly so that it can work for us. So we have all sorts of different kinds of strategies. So we have buying strategies, and we have learning strategies, and we have, of course, love strategies. And in NLP, the area that this falls under, strategies fall under, is basically our programming. It's how we do what we do. And most of this is an unconscious programming. So it's like a habitual thing that we do. So those are the kind of elements that strategies are. They're individual, they are uniquely to us and all about us, and they're very program based. As you probably guessed, the reason that we get strategies into our system is because of the repetition. We learn how to do something, and then we repeat it in a specific way over and over and over again, so that way of doing it becomes a habit, and that habit becomes unconscious. So what we're trying to do in this particular video is undo that unconscious programming so that we bring awareness to what we do and how we do what we do. So the point of this video, of course, is to bring our awareness to love strategies. How do we do our love strategies, and how do we need to change them to make our partners feel even more loved? This might look a little confusing to you, but this is how we in NLP look at strategies. So this is kind of like our little formula of how we look at strategies. The most important thing, and the place that we need to start, sort of ground zero, is our desired state. So we need to understand where we want to go before we can actually get there. So our desired state is sort of an assumed first step, and it's sort of ground zero. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to test whether or not our present state and our desired state are equal. And if our present state and our desired state are not equal, then that's when we go into what's called an operation or action. So that's when we go in and we start doing things, we start taking action to change our present state so that it equals to our desired state. So this operation continues to go back and forth between us testing, does our present state equal our desired state? No? Okay, fine, more action. Does our present state equal our desired state? No? Okay, fine, more action. Does our present state equal our desired state? Yes? Okay, fantastic, then we exit. So this in NLP is what we consider is the formula for operating a strategy. Test, operate, test, exit, or a trigger that starts the strategy, and then an operation that tests whether the present state and desired state are equal, and then another test that says, okay, they're equal, and an exit when they are equal. So it's a little bit of complication, but it gives you an overall understanding of when we work with love strategies, we first have to understand what is our desired state in our love strategy, and what is our present state, and are those two things equal? And if they're not equal, then we have to do this action. And so the action is what you're going to learn about pretty soon in the how. First, let's see where you are as far as your desired state is. So there is a handout, and if you haven't already printed it out, now would be a good time to pause the video and print out the handout at the end, because this is now the time that we're going to do that exercise in the handout. Now, what the handout is about is checking on your desired state. Is checking on when was the last time that you really, truly felt loved. And it asks you a series of questions about feeling loved. What we want to do is we want to take a particular relationship. So that might be a parental relationship, a sibling relationship, a romantic relationship, or maybe a relationship that's parental, like with your children. So we want to work on a specific relationship when we work on trying to find our present state to our desired state. So when we're answering these questions, we want to focus on one particular type of love instead of trying to use many different types of love. The love strategies will work better if you work on one particular type of love. So make sure that you're focused on that when you're doing the worksheet. Now, for some of you, when you do this worksheet, it might be quite painful because it might be a long time since you've actually felt that feeling, or there might be a lot of pain involved in your relationships in the current situation. And you might have to go back to different relationships to remember a time when you felt really, truly loved. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be the relationship that you're in now. What we're just looking for is when that time was, because that time is going to tell you some specific things about your particular love strategy. And we want you to have this awareness first before we go on to the next section, because it would allow you to understand what specific love strategy you have before we go on. So these little details about answering all these questions are really crucial to the next step. So go ahead and take some time, pause the video, and complete the handout, and do as best you can to complete the handout as thoroughly as possible. Even if it's painful, just try to answer the questions as much as possible. It might help if you just float back and close your eyes to remember that time that you were truly and honestly loved, that you felt that feeling of love. Because when you go back in time and feel the feelings of love, you'll notice all sorts of things that are going around you. So those are those things that are going on around you are the ones that we want to look at and we want to notice a lot. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video and complete the handout, and we'll see you in the next slide. Okay, now that you've completed the handout, we're going to go on to the specific love strategies. Now, this work is actually based on Gary Chapman's book called The 5 Love Languages. And so what he calls languages, in NLP we call strategies. So I highly recommend Gary Chapman's book. As you can see, my copy is quite worn. I use it quite a bit, especially with my clients. So the 5 love languages. So this is really fantastic. So we're going to go over what the 5 love languages are, or 5 love strategies are, and maybe from the information that you have from that handout you've done, you'll recognize some of the things that you've written down. Okay, let's get started. First is words of affirmation. So words of affirmation is somebody that is looking to be loved with phrases of gratitude or affirming phrases. So it's like saying thank you to this person and telling them how wonderful they are, or telling them that they really helped you when they did this particular thing. So any kind of positive comment, any kind of expression of gratitude, or expressing their qualities and talking about the qualities that they have is affirming them. So this is words of affirmation, and it's really important to this kind of person. So originally, when I read the book, The 5 Love Languages, my husband identified himself as words of affirmation. So I decided to do what Gary Chapman suggests and do a 30-day test to see if the words of affirmation really works. So what I would do is either text my husband or talk to him on the phone or email him some type of words of affirmation during the day. And during my experiment, my husband was traveling for several weeks. So most of the time I did have to either send him a message or email him, and occasionally I got to talk to him on the phone. What was very interesting about the experiment is there was a flow of love that came back to me from these little tiny things that I would say. And it was things like, I was at the ATM machine and there was a person at the ATM machine and they kept having to drop the number or the amount of money that they were trying to get out of their bank because they didn't have enough money. So they kept having to lower the number and lower the number. And so I said to my husband in a text message, I'm really thankful because I saw this today and I'll never have to worry about that. You work so hard. And so he was really, taken back by these little tiny things that I was saying every day. And of course, the love that I was getting back from him was quite good. The only problem is at the end of the 30-day experiment, it sort of all stopped. And according to Gary Chapman, it's not necessarily supposed to do that. So I was thinking, I wonder really if he is words of affirmation, or he might be something else. All right, so let's look at another one of the love languages. And this is quality time. So this is my love language, and surely 100,000% is definitely my love language. So my quality time has sort of a dialect. So my quality time dialect is quality conversation. So for me, having a quality conversation with my husband is so important. And by quality conversation, I mean like talking about goals and talking about fears and talking about any kind of thing that really connects us deeply. So that to me is love. Now, my husband is not a talker. He is not going to sit and chit chat with me all day long. That is not his thing to do. So for him to be able to express to me that he loves me, it's a chore for him. He has to practice at it. Now, thankfully, I'm really, really lucky because my husband does practice at it, and he's pretty darn good now. But it's really important because he didn't know about this, and our relationship was suffering in the fact that I could express love to him, but he could not get his expression of love to me. So that was one of the problems in our relationship. So I always kind of felt like I was getting missed out in the love area in our relationship. But when we learned about love languages and love strategies, we were able to change that. And that's really cool, and that's really important. So quality time basically just means that you're doing something together and spending quality time. Now, quality time isn't sitting in front of the television set next to your partner. That's not quality time for most quality time people. Most quality time people, it either has to do with an activity or conversation or something very specific. So always check with your person. If you think they're quality time, try the 30-day experiment, but you have to understand it might be about conversation, it might be about an activity, it might be something else. So always check with that. All right, the next love language or love strategy that we're going to look at is receiving gifts. So this basically is about someone purchasing something or making something, and that they know that when you've purchased or made something for them, that you were thinking about them at the time of the purchase. So it's about this thinking about them time, and it's a symbol of that. So the gift itself isn't so much important. It's the symbol of, I thought of you when I found this or when I made this. And it's that thought process it's that symbol of that thought process that you're giving that person. So for gifts people, this is really important to receive gifts. And they don't have to be expensive. They can be really small. They can be a card. So that's kind of really important. So my mother actually is a gifts person. And when I first read the Love Languages book, it really struck me because every Christmas and even for our birthdays, my mother gives us so many gifts. And it's almost like an obsessive compulsive disorder. She shops year round for her family because that's the way she wants to feel loved. It's her way of telling us that she loves us, but it's also the way she wants to receive love. So when I understood this, it's important for me to be able to give her back things. So if I'm going to say take her somewhere, like we went to Scotland or to New Zealand or something like that, I almost have to take the ticket and wrap it into a box and say, here, Mom, this is for you, because it's here I've shopped for this for you. It's that I'm thinking of you at the time symbol. So it's one of those things that the symbol of love is what they're looking for. So receiving gifts, I mean, it kind of sounds strange, but there are a lot of people who have this particular love strategy. So think about it, and maybe somebody in your life is like that. Maybe even you are like that. And it's not about the greed. It's not about the actual gift itself. It's not this superficial kind of thing. It's really about the symbol of the love. That's the most important thing to understand with the receiving gifts love strategy. All right, the next love strategy that we're going to look at is acts of service. So in acts of service, it's you're doing something for someone else. So that might be a project around the house. It might be mowing the lawn. It might be cooking. It might be any kind of these little chore kind of things that are acts of service. So I have a very dear friend of mine whose love strategy is acts of service, and specifically making her dinner. And her husband probably does it maybe twice a year, once for her birthday and once because of the fact that she's nagging him so much about it. But that's her love strategy. And for her, it's really important for him to do that, especially when she's stressed or there's something going on that's causing difficulties in the relationship. So I also have friends of mine who were in the United States, and they ended up getting divorced. And one of the reasons I saw that particular divorce happened was because of the misunderstanding of the love languages. So for the wife, she was also acts of service, and for her, I know this is going to sound strange, but it was her husband trimming their lawn. So not just mowing the lawn, anybody can mow the lawn or whatever, but it was actually trimming the edges around like the sidewalk and around their driveway and things like that. It was that particular level of detail that she wanted from her husband to feel loved. So that was quite interesting. But for him, he also had an acts of service, but his was a different dialect. It was a different service. So they both had the same love language, but because they had different acts of service, they weren't meshing together. So unfortunately, the relationship ended in a divorce, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that they just couldn't express the love for each other. Even after I tried to help explain to them what it might be in their relationship. So unfortunately, it didn't work for them. But if you have somebody in your realm that is an acts of service, try to find out what specific act of service it is. So for people who live as expatriates overseas, I live in a country where having a maid or having a helper is quite common. Now, if your husband has an acts of service that has something to do with cleaning the house and preparing dinner, and that service is being done by the helper or by the maid, then it's really crucial that you understand that your husband has acts of service, cleaning the house, making dinner, and putting it on the table as a love strategy, because you can pretty much find that husband is going to fall in love with the maid if you're not careful. And the reason is because he's not consciously aware of what his love language is. And the person who's giving him the love language isn't the person he really loves. It's just the person who's expressing love in the way that he wants to feel it on a regular basis. So big caution there. This is why we're learning about love strategies and making sure that you know and are fully aware of the spousal relationship and who has what love strategy. So the last love strategy or love language that we're going to look at is physical touch. And physical touch is about this neurochemical process that goes through our body when we actually physically hold each other. So for some people, this is a romantic sexual thing. For some people, it is just the act of holding hands. You'll find that you can watch people who have this and physical touch, and when they're with their partner, they're constantly touching them either on the shoulder or on the head, or holding their hand or rubbing their back or something like that. The physical touch is there quite prevalent, so you can see it. And so for people who really want physical touch as their love language, then hugs work really well. Now, that might not be specifically their dialect of physical touch, but it does create that that neurochemical process going that connects us through physical touch. So that's a really good way to do it. Now, if you remember from the very beginning when I told you that my husband was words of affirmation, and I did this 30-day challenge to see if the love continued to flow even after the challenge stopped. And as you remember, my love strategy didn't work so well, or my challenge didn't work so well. And I thought, is this really his words of affirmation, or is it something else? So the next thing I tried was this particular thing. So I tried physical touch, and I know that 20 seconds is the length of time it takes the neurochemicals to start flowing when you hug somebody. So I would hug my husband in the morning before he went to work for 20 seconds. Now, originally when I started this, my husband would stand there like a board, and he would be like, "Why are you hugging me?" And I would just continue to hug him. And then as the week progressed, he would be like, "Oh, don't hug me, you're too hot." And then I changed my strategy so that I hugged him underneath an air conditioning unit. And then after a week, he started hugging me back. And after 2 weeks, he started finding me in the house to tell me that it was hug time. And so that continues actually to this day, over 2.5 years later, that my husband will sit there and track me down in our apartment to come find me to tell me it's hug time. And if for any reason we miss hug time in the morning, it's the first thing he does when he comes home is do this hug. Now, I'm not a genius or anything, but I'm thinking that perhaps my husband's love language is physical touch, and a little bit more than words of affirmation. It's not like he doesn't like words of affirmation, but the physical touch really has worked for us 1,000%. So I highly recommend doing a 30-day challenge. And again, it's one of those things, we don't judge what's going on. We notice. We notice what kind of feedback we're getting. We notice what feedback we're not getting. We notice what's working and what's not working. It's not about failure. It's just about feedback. So try the 30-day challenge and try the one that you think is the most, and then try a different one just to do a comparison. It's a really good exercise. So here's the second part of the challenge. It's the difference between being reactive and being proactive. So you can continue to be in your relationship and keep continuing to react to what's not working in the relationship, or you can be proactive in the relationship. And by proactive, that means that you're going out and you're actually trying the 30-day experiment. You're noticing the results and what's happening, and you're really trying to be curious and sort of play detective about it. So the idea is that you're meeting your spouse or whoever you're working with at their love language, and you're trying to make sure that their love language is full first. And I know this sounds kind of sort of lopsided, but the idea is when you get someone else's love language flowing really well and their love strategy flowing really well, then it's easier for you to then bring in requests about your own love language. right? So they're in this place where they feel really good about what you're giving to them. It's much easier for them than to fulfill the request that you're making when you are when they're already at a place where they're feeling really good. Does that kind of make sense? So that's what we kind of want to do, is we want to get them in a place where they feel good, and then start requesting that our own love languages get filled. And perhaps maybe you just show them the book or have them read the book. That's what I did. And it worked. You read it. So again, the important thing to do is to notice instead of judge. This is really important in this 30-day challenge, as well as being proactive to fulfill your spouse's or the person you're working with, their love language first. So for some of you, it's going to take a little bit of a step of faith to be able to get this done. So in Gary Chapman's book, he talks at the very end of the book about a lady who whose husband didn't have sort of any reaction. So in the first 6 months of her giving her husband his love strategy or love language, she worked on it for the first 6 months. Now, after the first month, there was a little bit of reaction from her husband, but it actually took until the 6th month of her consistently giving her husband the love in his own love strategy before he was able to start giving her love back in her love strategy. So you kind of have to have a little bit of faith and believe that it's going to work, because for some people, they're so empty in love, you kind of have to keep filling them up so they trust that it's going to keep coming, that it's going to happen and it's going to work. So you really have to be dedicated to your relationship. You really want to have it work. And so this is the way I was when in my relationship, is that I really wanted my relationship to work. I didn't want to be another divorce statistic. I didn't really want to be that. I wanted to be in a relationship that was really going to last forever. I just needed to know how to be able to work that. What was the strategy that I needed to do? And this really, really helped, understanding my husband's love languages and filling those, the quality or the words of affirmation, but specifically the touch, and then asking him to be able to fulfill mine as well. So believe, it really does work. I'm still married after 17 years, thankfully, because of the work that I've done with my husband on love languages or love strategies. So this is your challenge. It's a 30-day challenge. You have it well in front of you. And again, try one, and if it doesn't work, try a different one. It's always good if you can have the person that you're working with read the book. If it's not an option, you just have to kind of go with a operate, test, exit kind of strategy, that you're going to just try to figure out which one it is. Take your best guess and go for it. And believe in the 30-day challenge, because it really does work. I've done it myself. I've heard hundreds of people that I've worked with, that I've done this presentation for, that have also done it, that have worked as well. So again, get their love flowing first before you start asking for them to come back and fulfill your own love strategies. I know it's kind of a unfair thing, I guess, to do at the beginning, but if you're really committed to your relationship, it will really work. So there's your 30-day challenge. I'm really excited for you, because it's a really cool and really fun thing to do. And again, keep that curiosity flowing. Keep it like a detective instead of being like a judge. Okay, cool. All right, this is the end of the video on love strategies, and I'm Lindley, helping to build a better you.